Well, I mean, what a day to wrap up all the wonderful things that have been happening here at the day one of the WE3 summit. I don't know about you, but it's been kind of a whirlwind of activity and great discussion in the comments. Thank you everyone who's been engaged. We've got some prizes and some really interesting engagement incentives out there for you. But to wrap up day one, we are about to dive into this panel discussion on opposite ends of the Pacific. Common purpose and comparative strategies. The preliminary conversation before we went live was really intriguing, and I know that they're going to each bring their perspectives. And with that, I'm going to pass things over to Jason, CEO of Zpryme, to moderate this panel.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, everyone, and good to see you again. I promise I only have one session left tomorrow, but we do appreciate all your time and comments and for being here with us today. But we're very excited. If you guys recall who've been with us throughout the day, we started with the keynote from the head of India at SoftBank, and he started. It was the evening his time, and today we get to end on a different perspective on our panel, opposite ends of the Pacific, common purpose and common strategies. We've got a great panel here, so I wanted to start off just by having each of them just shortly introduce themselves and where they're located at, in a brief background. And I'd like to start off with Linda.
Well, in here it's good evening. I am in Madison, Wisconsin, and I work for Alliant Energy. I'm currently the VP of Customer Operations and just turned over as interim CIO to our new CIO, Tom Tang. I have been with the company for 36 years and have virtually been in every area of utility business that we currently have. So I'm excited to be here and talk to you about what we're doing at Alliant.
Excellent. And Vivek, I'll hand it to you next.
Hi, it's good morning here in Sydney, Australia. So it's Thursday morning. I'm the group CIO of Intellihub. It's a metering services business. Our goal is to become the metering services provider of choice. We do everything in relation to gathering meter data, whether it's electricity or gas or water, and then do interesting things with that data and give it to our customers. So really exciting time for Intellihub as we evolve and utilize so many new technologies to add value to our customers.
And Steve.
I'm Steve Clemons. I'm the Chief Information Officer for the Sacramento Municipal Utility District. And I guess I should say good afternoon. It's still afternoon here in California. I've been with SMUD we're the 6th largest public utility in the country, and I've been with them for about 4 years now. Prior to that, I was at a cybersecurity company called iBoss, up and coming cybersecurity company out of Boston. And before that, I was with Qualcomm. I was with them for a number of years and have a 30-year history in technology. So I won't even go into all the background. We'll be here all day.
Thank you. Thank you. And George.
Yeah, thanks very much. Good evening from the UK. My name is George Hunt, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer and General Manager Europe for SEW. It's a role I've taken up fairly recently after returning to the UK from Australia, where I work for Sydney Water. I've been in this sector over 30 years, working for all sorts of amazing companies and in amazing places like Singapore, across the US, Australia, and of course the UK and the rest of Europe. I think one of the things that's very clear to me is that energy and water is key to a healthy life wherever you are. I've worked with WaterAid as well, which is a not-for-profit body that's looking to sort of help provide clean water and sanitation for all. And having been on that end of the spectrum, I realize how important water is to protecting the environment and health. I've had roles in American Water, Thames Water, National Grid, and a few other utilities like that. In Sydney Water, I had 2 roles, Chief Information Officer and General Manager for Digital, and also General Manager for Strategy and Regulation. So it's a thrill to be on this panel. Thanks very much. And back to you, Jason.
All right. Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, all of the above. It seems like we got all our bases covered. So let's get right into this conversation. Linda, I'd like to start with you and the work you've been doing in Alliant and some of the work, your latest work your team has been working on that's recently been deployed and how that has helped customers. If you can talk a little bit about that project, how that project has helped customers during COVID-19.
Well, I think you're referring to our project where we rolled out the SEW platform and what we're referring to as My Account, which is our customer interface system. We rolled out both the web application as well as the mobile app. And it was important to me, being a mobile app user, that it mirrored and allowed our customers to do whatever you wanted to do on your phone, you could do on the web app as well, and vice versa. We rolled it out coincidentally at the beginning of March, right before we went into lockdowns in the Midwest of the United States. And it really allowed our customers to self-serve in just about every way they could possibly want to with us. You can stop service. You can set up electronic payment. You can set up electronic billing, outage notification. You can look at your usage and get usage notification periodically through the month, depending on what you want. And like many utilities have talked about today, we also did stop our disconnection, late fees, everything during this time for customers who were trying to adjust to the environment we'd all been thrusted into. But as we came out of that, in one area, we did start disconnects based on different regulations. And we also were allowed to put credit cards onto our system as well, and with no fees, which in the United States is pretty rare. Normally we have to collect fees as we use those, but it really did allow our customers to get more information, take more control. They can do payment arrangements. And we really added a lot of flexibility to our payment arrangements to give people a broad spectrum, and really worked hard to give options to customers and grace to our customers. I think that's the one thing, and in all my peers I talk to across the world, I think all of us have learned to show a lot of grace for our customers. So it was really timely that system went in, and it has been well received by our customer base.
Thank you, thank you. And I think you make a good point there, Linda, in terms of, especially in the context of this panel, when we think about the U.S. and how things operate, 50 states and everyone's regulated differently. But the approach that in this specific case of grace and all the things that people are trying to do to help customers and continue to do has definitely been unifying, and something that has been brought a lot of hopefulness throughout not just the utility industry, but I think folks watching it as we navigate that. Thank you for sharing that story. And with that, I'd like to turn it to Vivek now in terms of working in Australia. And maybe if you can tell our audience just some context of some of the major events that are impacting the electric sector in Australia. Maybe some comments on smart metering might be helpful. And I know the solar is a big issue there as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jason. So I think it would be worthwhile to give some context. So Australian market is quite deregulated. Generation retail is quite separate, although some retailers do have some generation aspects as well. Also recently, about 3 years ago, there was an initiative by the government to have power of choice, which is basically giving more choice to the end customer in terms of choosing their energy provider. Now, all those things sort of lend towards customers being more enabled and choosing retailers. But then more importantly, there's a focus on the cost aspect of energy as well. So that has driven a large rooftop solar install base in the residential space, at least in Australia. And that has driven other challenges in relation to the stability of the grid, how much power is being put into the grid, etc. So to do all of that, smart metering, or to be able to capture and record data effectively in real time, is very beneficial from a network perspective, from a retailer perspective, and eventually also from an end customer perspective. So they can see their consumption, which is something that Linda has just mentioned, the bill payments, etc. So that's just user experience for the end customer. But more importantly, there are other applications which we are sort of more focused on. So capabilities that are available to us at this point in time in terms of technology, we got large data ingestion capability in near real time. We got feeds coming in every 5 minutes or even sub 5 minutes. So we know what's going on in households. Meters are communicating continuously. What do we do with that data? So there are certain things, value adds, which we are looking into, disaggregation, etc., machine learning and things, where we think we can add a lot of value to the end customer in terms of what's going on to continue to manage their bills, but also be more environmentally conscious as well. Then there is the electrical vehicles, other applications that are coming along, which have a direct impact on usage. So Australia does have the tariffs change during the day. So there's off-peak, peak, shoulder, etc., and there's different rates in terms of how the energy is charged. So to make the use of energy at the right time for the right purpose in the right device is quite important. Retailers do have apps which they want to push. From an Intellihub's perspective, we want to standardize the visualization of data through SEW. But then again, different people will use different approaches to reach out to the end customers to deliver the information. So a lot going on. It's an absolutely exciting time in Australia and New Zealand to do more with data and also what the smart devices can do behind the meter. So all that I've talked about so far is at the meter level, but there's a bunch of activities and very interesting things we can do behind the meter in terms of connectivity within the household and just getting a real holistic view of what's happening at the endpoint. So really exciting time.
Yeah, thank you. And so I'll turn now to Steve. And Steve, California is always looked at as different and leading a lot of things. And so it might be helpful for the audience if you can maybe tell us a little bit how California is different, and also maybe how some of those policies that California has really set SMUD up to be a national leader across several different initiatives.
Yeah, so California has made a real effort for carbon-free, zero carbon. I mean, that's the goal. And SMUD is being even more aggressive than pretty much anybody, even in California. We have a goal of zero carbon by 2030. So you can imagine everything that goes into that, of looking at all of our generation facilities, especially our thermal plants, and looking at how we re-engineer those, how we add more renewable resources, but how we do things in a lot of different ways using new technologies. Looking at demand response, how do we work with our customers for demand response in order to lower some of the peak energy usage so we're not using as many as our carbon producing plants. Looking at potentially vehicle to grid. One of the things that California is going to mandate is new electric vehicles sold by 2035, replacing all gas vehicles. That's a huge effort on our part to try and make sure our grid and we can take advantage of the electric vehicles and support them within our environment. So having charging as a service, being able to bill, being able to manage some of the charging in the territory. And then, as I said, vehicle to grid. We are talking about that a lot for battery storage, and that may be a huge part of moving us to a more carbon-free environment. We're also looking at building electrification, working with new building within the territory. So a lot of the new houses that are being built are all electric and have solar. California has a solar mandate for new homes being built, that they have solar panels on them. So there's this real push in California for green energy. And as we start thinking about the customer and the effect on the customer, how we put in technologies, how we put in services that will meet their needs. The last thing I would want to see is we have an electric vehicle mandate and can't support it on the grid. So huge infrastructure that we're doing, changes to it as we look at zero carbon, making sure that we're reliable, that we have energy when we need it. That's going to be a challenge as people start to plug in their cars midday or even in the evening. So that's a lot of the things we're looking at. It's actually really exciting. I think since we came out with our new vision, which was about a month ago with our new CEO, it's cause everybody to be very motivated, because it starts us thinking about how do we achieve this goal and how do we be the standard for really the world in how we can actually make this happen and be successful.
Thank you. And George, I wanted to talk a little bit about on the water side, because I think that's what's unique about WE3 is that we get to dive into both worlds, which doesn't happen very often, believe it or not. And some of the major work you saw, major enterprise work you saw there in Sydney Water, just what were some of those drivers of that project, and maybe what were some of the early benefits of that?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. It's a really great question. I probably need to start a little bit by just explaining a few things about Sydney Water. Sure. Sydney Water is the largest water and wastewater utility in Australia, covers the whole of Greater Sydney and serves over 5 million citizens. That population is set to grow significantly to about 8 million over the next 30 years. And it's going to grow in Western Sydney, where water is scarce and the urban heat is rising. So that's one of the drivers, which is quite important. Sydney Water is also a state-owned corporation. That means it's owned entirely by the New South Wales government, but still operates with an independent board of directors, independent regulators, and that provides Sydney Water with the benefits of large-scale government, to whom we pay a dividend, but also a much greater level of agility and commerciality when it comes to business transformation and digital transformation. So, and also public and private partnerships. So that's the kind of context. And you're right, Sydney Water is, back to your question, you're right, Sydney Water is in the middle of a major transformation right now, and there's lots of drivers. On a macro level, as a state-owned corporation, Sydney Water is fundamental to supporting the government's vision to make Sydney a truly smart city, a city that can rival Singapore, Seoul, London, New York is an economic powerhouse, etc. But on a more localized level, the Sydney Water Board and the executive have an ambitious strategy to become a customer-centric digital business, focused on keeping the bills affordable, protecting and enhancing the environment, and providing a good shareholder return. Sydney Water is also now sort of subject to competition, which is unusual as a regulated monopoly. So there's a threat of being disintermediated, where developers will come in and build their own assets and operate them and create smart precincts. So just to summarize a couple of those key drivers, customers are asking us to be more efficient, more focused, and more centric around customers. But there's the impact of climate change and the impact of competition. And all of this is coupled with rapid growth. So in order to serve that rapid growth, we realized that doing more of the same would just not cut it. It would require us to scale up infrastructure and cost in the region of $30 billion, which generations ahead of us will pay for years to come. So we realized that doing more of the same wasn't going to cut it at all. And in turn, if we did that, we'd have to augment with desalination, and that would change our carbon footprint. And all of those factors came into play. So we had to look differently at how we did these things. I just want to say something very quickly about how the water company operates. And the reason I want to mention this is it operates in a linear economy, which means that we were taking water from the environment, we were making it potable, we were distributing it for consumption, then we were collecting it and disposing of it in the ocean. It was a very linear process. And it's very inefficient, because just about every litre we collected and treated, collected and distributed for use, we would collect again, process it as waste, and put it out to deep ocean outfall. So it's very linear. And we had to, when we were thinking about doing water differently, we thought, well, so how do we change that? How do we actually close the circle and make it a circular economy rather than a linear economy? And we'd been watching what's been going on in energy quite a lot. And we'd seen the idea of lots of smart meters and people acting as prosumers and putting energy back into the grid. And we were thinking, how can we embrace some of that, as well as everything that we were knowing as Industry 4.0, and turn it into a circular economy. Now the government is in a conversation with the general public there at the moment on how we embrace water reuse and water recycling. And that's been a tough conversation for many years politically. But having just come out of significant drought, the general public are in listening mode, and the general public and the customers were very keen to say, we think there is a different way of doing water, and there's a different way of recovering energy to keep your carbon footprint down. There's a different way of actually treating water so that you recover more from it, you use it more than once, and we're willing to listen, and so are the regulators. So this idea of a true water energy nexus is really unfolding in front of our eyes. Over and above all of that, Sydney Water's doing all the normal things that you would expect around digitization, around customer. It's definitely moving from being an analog business with a digital veneer to being a digital business at the heart. And that's really important, because like many utility companies, we put that digital edge on the organization and made things better, but we hadn't actually truly got to the heart of things. So that was an important feature. Back to your question in terms of the early benefits. We got this program underway purely because we'd won the hearts and minds of all the key stakeholders, including the customers and citizens, but including the regulators, the wider industry, developers, and also the government itself, who are our shareholders. So we've had a number of benefits. One of the most significant was being recognized as Digital Utility of the Year in 2018. That was nice recognition across our peer group in Australia. But we've also done a lot around putting IoT devices to protect the environment. We had a history of polluting the environment a little bit, where assets would fail. So we put a lot of sensors around using IoT so that we can get ahead of an incident. We started to build much smarter assets which are now being referred to as water factories or resource refineries. So it's trying to change the mindset that we're not a utility, or Sydney Water will not be a utility, a traditional one anymore. And there's a whole range of other things as well. But one of the most significant things that we're noticing is that the organization is realizing that doing more of the same will just not cut it. And we needed to look at how we did water differently. And the organization and the wider stakeholder groups are coming along that journey nicely with the company. And that's happening across Australia.
Thank you. Thanks for kind of taking the time to kind of walk us through that. I think that's part of kind of the lift that this conference is really trying to take, is merge where in this panel is where there's differences and where you can find similarities. So I'm going to turn to Linda and Steve and kind of get your thoughts. And Linda, if you can take a stab at this first. You know, what is driving those major overhaul efforts at your utility, Alliant now, especially in the context of COVID? What are you seeing as the major drivers there?
I'm going to back up and answer a question that came in on chat.
Okay, great. Yeah.
We instituted started our smart energy water journey actually earlier as we were evaluating software. We had a different digital process before. It just wasn't meeting the needs of our customers. So that's why we had begun implementation, and it was scheduled for March, which just happenstance coincided with the beginning of our pandemic lockdowns. But as far as what have we learned through the pandemic, I would say that we've learned to be maybe a little less judgmental, because as people have gone through this, many of us know people now who have lost their homes, lost their jobs, and are in circumstances that probably unimaginable to most of us. So I think now our neighbors are part of this group who are trying to help. It's really got a face and a name, and it's allowing us to think in terms of, what do you need as a friend versus what do you need as a customer? And I think it's elevated us to the next level of trying to solve our customers' issues and work with them. We went to a payment arrangements as long as 5 years. If that's what you need, that's what we'll give you. Ironically, 38% of our customers are choosing less than 12 months. But really giving them options on, how do we work with you to be financially successful? and not financially destroyed. So again, I think we're showing grace in so many different ways. And I think we're learning more about ourselves and how you can accomplish being successful at the same time, showing that grace and extending grace and helping people. We're very involved in, we did a reconnect program after a derecho in Iowa to help our customers. Not only are they going through a pandemic, but they had a Category 4 hurricane hit the middle of the United States, which is really rare. So just learning, I think we're learning a lot about ourselves. We're learning what we can digitize, what our customers want, what channels they want to use, but also realizing you have demographics that maybe don't have the digital literacy to go there. And not everyone wants it, believe it or not, not everybody wants a computer. So looking at those channels and seeing what serves that customer base best and giving that optionality.
Thank you. And Steve,
Yeah, and I was going to say, I certainly concur with everything you said, Linda, and I don't want to repeat anything, but the customers are the heart and soul of our utility, making sure that we meet them with their needs and understand their needs through this whole thing. But I'll take it from a little different perspective from the staff side. We actually had to move 1,400 employees off-site within 48 hours, and we did that successfully. We moved our call center, home-based agents, and making sure that our agents were available to answer calls, be able to work with our customers, and that our staff were safe. One of the things we did for 2 months is actually sequestered our line crew, making sure that they were safe and that they were able to go out and make sure our utility was reliable, that people still had electricity. So it was a huge undertaking. I think it really tested our business continuity plan and really was something that stressed the need for business continuity and making sure that our applications and technologies could support our staff so that they could support our customers. One of the big moves that we had made over the last few years is into the cloud, moving a lot of our IT into the cloud, cloud-based services, not having to rely so much on our data center. If we had to rely on our data center and tools like Office that were running in the data center instead of Office 365, our tools for the customer, we wouldn't have been as successful as we were. So, you know, it's fortunate that with a little forethought, we really started to move things into the cloud and support our staff and in turn support our customers.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Two great points there. There was another question that came in on chat and we'll go and take a stab at that. Do you see a need to be able to provide life-sustaining minimum water allowance, even in the absence of payment? Do you see the remote shutoff of meters as a tool to support this? And maybe that's George, if you want to take a stab at that one. I'm not sure if Linda or Steve or Vivek have thoughts there on that question.
I think the regulators have a role to play here a little bit. There were 3 regulators that were primary in Sydney Water's case, at least. It varies, of course, around the world, but there was a public health regulator, there was an environmental regulator and a commercial regulator. And quite often the 3 bodies were at odds with each other. The environment regulator would say invest more in your assets, and the commercial regulator would say we're not justifying that investment. And meanwhile, the customers are struggling with resilience or pollution type events. So I think if the regulators were able to be more aligned, then part of that regulation would probably provide sort of a minimum level of service. That's quite difficult when you're moving into a competitive landscape as well, because you end up asking the question, who's the supplier of last resort in a model like that? Or who runs the network and who runs the retail part? And what's the role of a market operator or market aggregator? So just very quickly on the question, I think it's the role of regulation and the mandate of regulation that will probably set what's right for customers and citizens. And I think that's how it should be. You know, I think their mandate should be to represent the voice of the customer or the voice of the citizen if it's to do with livability in the environment. Because, you know, we talk about the customer, but actually there's several types of customer. The consumer who pays, let's call them the customer because they know about the cost. There's the community who live, then there's developers who are also customers in a way because they're connecting into the network. So I think the regulator probably has a role to play to set that minimum standard. But I'm very open to the challenge.
Yeah, just to add to that, what George is saying there, I mean, in Australia, there's some assistance from the government as well for certain households who may find it difficult to pay for bills, etc. There are subsidies for aged pensioners or older residents as well. So obviously, water is absolutely critical for survival. Australia is a very, very dry continent or nation. With climate change and other patterns which are shifting, things are sort of a little bit more unpredictable. Not quite sure how things will pan out in the next 10, 20 years. So an efficient use of this most valuable resource is so critical. And if you can use data and information and technology and sensors, things that George has just talked about, is just going to be beneficial to use this resource most efficiently. I mean, that's the fundamental thing, and it's so critical for farming and as well as human survival.
Got it. So Steve and Linda, I want to build off that a little, because we've definitely heard the customer point come up, tied with that grace that everyone's showing. Do you guys both see this new emergence of these tools to allow to be able to serve that lifeblood of your organizations better? And do you see maybe you consumers who they didn't always maybe track as, hey, they weren't going to be as engaged, but now you're seeing that. Do you see these playing bigger roles in the organization going forward?
I'll go ahead and go first. I absolutely do. I think that I've read that the digital world advanced about 5 years in the first 5. Overnight, you went from having 4,000 employees out in offices to 4,000 employees working from home, and getting established and looking at where we go from here and engaging those customers and employees both is just critical.
Yeah, I agree. And in conversations I've had with Deepak at SEW on the roadmap is, where are we headed in the future? Where do we head in terms of tools for electric vehicles, tools for building electrification? I think people will be paying far more attention to their utility usage because they're going to be more reliant on it. As they start using it for the fuel for their vehicles, typically people are looking at how much gasoline do I use? How much did I spend on gasoline? Now they're going to start thinking about it from the perspective of how much do I use for my vehicle? How do I use my vehicle to charge my home? How do I manage the cost structures? We have time of use rates here in Sacramento. So as people try and time, when do I charge my car? When do I charge my battery? When do I discharge my battery? How do I make sure my solar is most efficient? It's going to be a really interesting algorithm that we're going to have to help people with. And they're going to have the tools to be able to do that. We're also putting in a advanced distribution management system right now, and we're building a DERM system, the digital energy or distributed energy resources system, so that we can manage those tools on the grid and manage the grid with all of this that's coming. So huge undertaking, and I agree, and it's just not Corona that's moving us forward in this last year. It's looking at renewable resources, advances in solar, advances in electric vehicles, and how we're going to manage that. So it's pushing us, and also, as you said, Linda, as well, customer expectations about how they reach us, whether it's a mobile app, whether it's using AI or machine learning, making sure that we have the data that they need and the information they need in order to make the right decisions about their electric usage and about managing the grid and managing our infrastructure. So it's a really exciting time. I think, probably 20 years back, we wouldn't have been having these conversations, or 15 years back even, whereas I think energy companies are becoming the technology companies of the future in a lot of ways, and it's up to partners like SEW and other partners that we have to help us move ahead and for us to help push them as well. That's one of the things in terms of conversations with SEW I've had is, where do we go together? where do we think, have thought leaders on where energy is headed, where water may be headed, so that we can advance as rapidly as our customers are expecting us to.
Well, and the reality of the situation is we now live in an Amazon world.
Right.
And it has reshaped the customer expectation, maybe not for all of our customers, but for the majority of our customers. So learning to move at that pace is something new for our industry. And just speaking for Alliant, I think we're stepping up to that. The way we're engaging in renewables, you know, ADMS, DERMS, we're even though we're in different parts of the country or different parts of the world, we're all challenged with the same customer thought process. And I don't think it varies all that much from one spot to another. Customers want ease of use. I don't know too many customers who want to watch their kilowatt usage on a second by second basis, but they want good, reliable energy at a decent cost, and more dependent on it. And I think if there's one thing our customers realized during a pandemic is how dependent they are on gas, electric, and water. When you're at home all the time, your kids are at home, you need internet constantly. It's really, our world is far more integrated than I think we ever imagined. And the pandemic, I really think, just emphasized it, which just requires us all to be smarter and faster.
Yeah.
It's like Jason got muted there for a second.
Oh, am I back?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So talking about the evolution, Vivek and George, clearly this is that point where people are ready to dive in and move forward together. So how does this engagement on the digital side evolve? Vivek, you want to take that?
Yeah, okay, I'll go first. Thanks, Jason. I think, as I mentioned before, we are collecting more and more data on a daily basis. So as we roll out more smart meters in Australia, it's, I think, sitting somewhere around 14 to 20% smart meters across the country. New Zealand is a much higher number, I think more like 94%, 95%. So we're getting a lot of data coming in, and not just consumption data, we're also getting other electrical, like volts and power factors and things like that. So utilizing all of that, as sort of Stephen mentioned as well, machine learning, advanced algorithms to see what's going on, disaggregation algorithms, which device is using what, other sensors, IoT devices in the house, to have a holistic picture of how best a customer can use energy efficiently to lower the cost and help the environment and create reliability across the grid in general is I think, a very exciting time where all of these things are sort of culminating together. The technology, the capability, the the customer focus as well, and regulatory pressure as well. Politicians are also getting pressured to lower costs for end customers. There have been massive outages in Sydney last year because of fires and other limitations in the grid. There have been fires in California, which have caused a lot of grief. So all of these things require data-based analytics, which can help end customers, I think. And then, as Linda mentioned, nobody wants to watch their apps, second by second or minute by minute, of course. But there needs to be capability running continuously in the back end, which is alerting customers to what they're interested in whenever it happens. And then they can make those decisions quickly at that time of their choosing. They can set profiles, they can set preferences, they can take immediate actions to do whatever they need to do. So our focus is around some of those capabilities and how to deliver that for our customers who are the retailers, because we don't engage directly with end customers. We engage with customers who are retailers, and then they have end customers. So we need to enable our customers, the retailers, to do what they need to do with the data that they have to serve the end customers. So I think data is just important. Digitization is key. and everything we're doing with AWS technologies, with microservices and stuff, and to ingest large amounts of data is just so crucial. Yep. Back to you, Jason.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to turn that over to George, and if someone wanted to take the audience question here, we have about 5 minutes to try to get that in and get some final thoughts in.
Okay, I'll try and be brief, Jason. I just wanted to pick up on something that Linda, Vivek, and Stephen have mentioned, really, which is it's very interesting to think ahead as to what will this sector look like if we had a true water energy nexus, if we had a true circular economy, if we were able to provide customers and citizens with the Amazon experience that they've come to expect. It kind of says there's a role out there for a market operator or a market aggregator, somebody that brings together supply and demand, somebody that where it doesn't matter who owns and operates or builds the assets, providing there is a service coming to the customer with that is resilient and reliable and cost and affordable. There's a role here for somebody that interacts with the customers and interacts with the ecosystem of supply. If you think about what Amazon does, Amazon is really just brokering a whole series of relationships between supply and demand. And I could see a future where, if I think of myself as a citizen or a customer, I just want to be able to look at something and see things that are relevant to me. I may not even worry about who my supplier is in terms of energy, water, gas, or whatever. I just want to see something that gives me some insight and some empowerment to make some decisions that are relevant to me. So I think it's very interesting to think what a resources marketplace might look like in the future, and how utility businesses might evolve into becoming what you might think of as a digital platform business. And that's where some of these technologies like the SEW technologies and a whole host of other things will all come together to provide that experience. There's no clear answer, but it's quite interesting to let your mind think about it.
Thank you. Well, this time has gone by fast, but I wanted to give everyone, we could probably spend all day and diving into these things, but I want to give everyone just a final thoughts. Your peers are out there. I think obviously we found some common ground, even in the midst of different markets and different regulatory frameworks out there. So your peers out there who are on the fence, who haven't been able to move as fast, what advice do you have for them to say, hey, now is the time to put your plan in place? And Linda, start with you.
Well, I think you're never too late, but I would not wait. The market is developing and getting in now to help it develop. And I think you have to remain flexible. And I think we're past the installing systems that are there for 30 years. We're going to have to look, you've got to engage your customers. You've got to engage them where they are and how they want to be engaged. And it really requires a digital format that's flexible and meets the customer needs. So I think you have to engage early and often. But waiting, I think, is the worst mistake you can make, because you do have to get into this and start to build. And you can't, you have to start somewhere and get into it as quickly as you can. Use as many agile principles as you can to move fast.
Steve, your advice to them?
Yeah, I agree. And we're not a monopoly. At one point we may have been a monopoly, and I've heard some utilities who have still some monopolistic ideas, but, we have to partner with our customers, understand where they're going, engage them often, work with our technology platforms and our technology partners to help us get there, make things simpler for our customers. As a consumer of electricity outside of Sacramento, in a very complex environment with multiple rates, sometimes it's hard to make heads or tails out of it. The utility is putting in SEW at this point, and I actually hope it makes it easier because it's very difficult at this point. So that would be the thing, partnering with all of our partners, with our customers, and really engaging with them early and often, meeting them where they're at with the tools that they need.
Fantastic. And Vivek, what's your advice for those on the fence, not ready to take that first step?
Yeah, so I think with the digitization process that is just happening, and we can't stop that, there's going to be competition coming from all sides, all directions. They're going to be new move-ins into this space in terms of how to add value to the end customer. So monopolies, I think they don't exist, or they're on the way out, but it's going to get more competitive, that's for sure. The other thing is try pilots and POCs and small initiatives, because the challenge businesses and large corporations have is they have business processes that don't difficult to sort of change, and see how the customers can be benefited. Integration is important, and then choosing the right partner is key as well. So those are some of the things to look out for, I guess.
Thank you. And George, you can wrap us up there.
All right, I'll try and be brief. I just want to read everything that our colleagues have said on this last part here. But I suppose the bit that I might say is win the hearts and minds and get on with it. Put a compelling case together, think differently, build a compelling vision, sell it, win the hearts and minds, and get on with it. Don't procrastinate, learn, and move fast.
Well, it's been a fantastic panel, and my thought that comes to mind is last week I heard someone say, who would ever thought that the utility industry would be the industry to be in? And I think this conversation kind of highlights that, and I appreciate you guys being here day, morning, afternoon. Thank you so much, panel. And Joyce, we'll hand it back to you.
Oh my gosh, well, definitely the perfect panel to wrap up day one of the WE3 Summit. I know that this was deeply impactful to me, and I'm sure to all of our audience participants who, by the way, congratulations guys for being super engaged in the comments section with each other, sharing really great information, as well as asking super insightful questions. I know we're going to see more of that tomorrow. Please remember to join us at 9:15 for the first session. With that, thank you so much and have a great evening.